start looking and speaking to colleagues to understand how they would approach that. Now, once you actually do have that plan in place, we move to create. You're going to write some code, you're going to build some infrastructure. Essentially, I like to call this the kind of the asset that is needed to actually deliver on that task that you have. And as a developer, this is probably where you want to be spending the most of your time, right? This is the really exciting portion of being a developer. But before you can actually ship that code, we have to do some validations. First, we want to properly test and make sure that the thing that we've built actually matches the expectation. And we already have mechanisms for this, right? Unit tests, integration tests, acceptance tests, probably even more tests than I can name there. But ultimately, using testing as a way to be able to validate that what you have implemented matches expectations. Now, in addition, you want to make sure that you're not introducing new security vulnerabilities. You're not introducing bad practices into your code, which leads us into the deploy stage. Now, in review and deploy, what we're really talking about is actually kind of this kind of peer review element of it, being able to make sure that the code is actually doing what's expected, not having those bad practices, before it makes its way into production. Of course, once it makes its way into production, many software engineers work in companies where actually you build it, you run it. So you don't just kind of ship the code. If something goes wrong, you're expected to debug, to troubleshoot, to understand as well what is happening in those environments. Now, finally, what happens actually is that sometimes code bases and applications are no longer continually being innovated on, but they still need to actually run, right? And with that, there's still a little bit of operations, right? We still need to make sure that we're actually upgrading frameworks and library versions. Maybe we have to still try and move away from some legacy kind of hosting modes into more recent kind of patterns there. So this all encompasses underneath the maintain, transform, and modernize stage. So this is really the reason for Amazon Q Developer. We saw this as not just a tool that needs to help developers in that create stage, a tool that needs to help developers throughout the software development lifecycle, enabling them to spend more time on doing the things they love to be doing, bringing joy back to development, right? That's what we're really aiming for here. Now, as you can imagine, there is no single feature that would be able to do this, right? So what's needed to be developed is actually adding generative AI intelligence throughout every stage of that software development lifecycle. That includes writing code with code recommendations. That includes agentic capabilities that are able to help us to do some of the heavy lifting, right? Write our documentation, create our unit tests, even do some of those code reviews for us. And also having that expert available wherever you need it, available in the console to help you to troubleshoot and debug, and actually even to be able to understand elements like the resources you have and your cost. Now, the foundation, we also have security. If this is not your first webinar or Amazon presentation, I'm sure you realize that actually we value security very highly. And so from day one, we've actually had security recommendations as a feature of Q Developer, being able to really help developers to shift left and have security be in the development experience and not being something that is only validated once it gets to peer review, build stage, or even worse, getting to production. That's the worst time to pick up a security issue. Okay, so what does Q Developer aim to do? When we're thinking about Q Developer, we're really thinking about four key needs. Firstly, how do we help build faster? And that's not about just helping you to create net new code. That's helping you to do some of the heavy lifting around the actual writing of code. As I said, generating unit tests, being able to actually do some of that documentation for you. So it frees you up to spend more time on doing those really, really exciting and rewarding tasks, which is where we want to get to here. Now, the second key need that it addresses is around operating on AWS. This is about being able to understand around your resources, being able to understand about elements like cost. And when you're in those moments where it's stressful, your manager's standing behind you saying, "Why is the system wrong?" Having a tool that can actually help you to troubleshoot and to debug, get things back online faster. Now, the third key need is around transformation. As I said, those workloads where we still need to support and maintain them, but we're not really innovating. So how can we use generative AI maybe to actually help with some of those projects to actually do the heavy lifting and then have us just validate to make sure it does what we expected it to do without having to dedicate large portions of time to have developers be doing that, manually project by project, file by file. The final key need is actually around helping developers to accelerate the time to be able to really get benefit from their own data and to be able to embed AI in their own applications. There can often be, a little bit of a learning curve, right? If you haven't touched any of these kind of projects before, Q Developer is actually helping to help even people who haven't necessarily touched these kinds of projects before, helping them to understand what they should be considering, and really also embedding that in those kinds of services as well, so you have the expert guidance. Now we're going to be focusing today on build, and we're going to be focusing on transform, and we're going to be looking at agentic capabilities that can really do some complex stuff for us. Now, on to the topic of complexity. Developer has significantly increased in its capabilities since launch. These range all the way from features which are designed to be very, very low latency, they're designed to be fast, but they don't need much context to be able to generate an output, all the way from tasks which actually take, days or weeks for a developer to do, where we use orchestration around kind of be able to do some of those complex actions. So, just having a look at some of these capabilities, and this is really around that build faster stage. We have all the way from inline code generation, inline chat, where it's going to generate some code snippets pretty much as you're writing them. Now, chat actually takes this up a notch, where you can actually provide written text and actually have it generate the code, and you can even iterate on it backwards and forwards. Now, once you move on from just chatting about an individual file, maybe you want to talk about the workspace. And this is where at workspace helps. If you add this modifier into your chat and you use at workspace, you could say, "Hey, where is the logic for maths calculation?" And it maybe says, "Hey, this calculator class looks like the right place to go." That's at workspace. That can help with some more challenging questions. And then finally, customization. Maybe you have some internal libraries, some internal APIs, and you want Q Developer to be able to understand about these so that it can actually make recommendations using these rather than just its generalized knowledge, which is still powerful, but maybe just doesn't understand some things around your organization. So this really helps to move it from being just generalized to also being about your organization, your practices there. Now, there's a huge gap on the right-hand side, which is around this complexity, and this is where we're going to be spending the remaining portion of the session today. So this is agents. Agents, as I said, they're all around these kind of orchestrated generative AI capabilities where it can do some really complex things. And it can do it in a way where it's actually quite simple for you as the user to actually instruct it to do that. Now there's 5 of these today. We have /dev, /test, /review, /doc, and /transform. Let's just quickly understand what each of these does, and then we're going to jump into some demos. So, firstly, /dev. Feature development. So this is actually an agent designed to be able to operate across the workspace. You give it a task, it goes through, it understands the files it needs to use in that, and actually will go ahead, modify existing files, create new files. It can be used for actually a lot of software engineering tasks. Before we actually had some of the agents, this could also was the recommended way for generating like unit tests across our project and documentation as well. But we're going to see we actually have some specialized agents now that take that up even further. Talking about one of those use cases, slash test. So we do have a agent specifically designed for unit test generation and how to write Java and Python unit tests. Super simple. We'll see in the demo how you use it, but think of this as the agent that has the best set of instructions for really creating good unit test for your classes. Now, slash doc is designed to help you to create beautiful README documents, right? I'm talking documents that would take you a few hours, maybe even a couple of days to get that level of depth in there. And the great news is you can actually run it and you can even then ask it to do further modifications to your README. And again, do that very simply. You don't have to provide it which sections. It understands what it should actually include for a good README there. Now, for code reviews, we have slash review. If anyone's ever seen our security scanning feature, this actually takes it to the next level. It enables you to get a list of potentially action items that you need to take a look at, ranked by severity, for addressing security and bad practices, ultimately. And then finally, slash transform. This enables you to be able to actually modernize existing workloads. Specifically in the IDE, you can do this with Java, you can do this with .NET, but we do also have a web-based experience for this agent for COBOL workloads, as well as for VMware migrations. Now, we're going to be spending the rest of the talk actually going through each of these. We're going to have demos. So you're going to see it for yourself. I think that's really the best way for you to understand. I'm going to take the first couple, and then I will hand over to Mirabella. But let's jump into some demos, which I'm sure people are eager to see. Now, to really understand what we're going to be doing, I want to introduce you to keywords. Keywords is a simple application. It's a game where the system basically thinks of a word and you have to guess what that word is. So what we can see actually in here, I'm going to guess animal, and it is very likely to tell me that I am correct based on the fact that I recorded this earlier. There we go, it's correct. A very, very simple game, but actually in terms of the features that are available, of how well maintained the repository is, it's not really in a great state. So we're going to make some changes throughout the remaining portion of the session. Starting with the agent for software development. So as it kind of says on the tin, you want to implement a new feature. This is what that agent does. You basically type slash dev and you give it a description, almost like you would give to another team member, and you say, hey, here is what I want. I want you to make this change. And it's going to basically build up a plan, and then it's going to execute on that plan step by step. So jumping into our IDE, it's very, very easy to interact. On the left-hand side, we see this Q icon. I can click on it, that opens the chat, and then I just type slash, and it gives me access to each of the agents that we are going to go through. Now we're starting with that slash dev. So I click it, and then I'm going to paste the description. Here I actually want to include a HTML table that's just going to include the guesses I've made so far as a player. And just give it some basic information. We're not telling it exactly all of the fine-grained details, but once we're happy, we're just going to hit return, and it's basically going to start coming up with a bit of a plan. What do I mean by this? Well, in the same way that if I gave you a task in your Kanban board, you're not likely to just kind of jump straight into the code and go, oh, I'll change this, I'll change. He thinks methodically and goes, right, what are the changes that I'm probably going to have to go ahead? What are the steps I'm going to need to take to be able to execute this? Now, what actually is going to happen is it's going to, you can see these files used here. What's actually going to happen is it's going to explore the workspace, right? So it's going to understand what is the particular files that maybe I need to really open here to resolve this issue. And it's going to also start showing this taking. So we can see step one here, it's just said, based on the statement, we need to add guess history tracking to the game UI and backend. First, I'm going to open some relevant files to inspect the code for both the front end and the back end components. We haven't told it to do that. It's actually thought this is probably a good first step here. Now, as it continues, what we're going to see is the files used. That's going to change as it kind of maybe modifies files or creates files. And that summary of changes is just going to tell you what it's kind of doing in near real time there, right? So we see a second step here. It's actually saying, I think these are going to be the most relevant files. And then it's going to kind of go through and continue to say, look, now I've actually decided I need to create a new model to store this information. We can actually even see the created there. It's actually created that new model to store that information. And then it's going to start thinking, right, how do I expose this into the HTML? We'll see that in just a second. And then it's also going to have to embed that probably within that controller as well. So I'm speaking a little bit quicker than it's thinking. This is actually real time, by the way. I haven't modified the video. I just recorded it and have left it there. But we can see it's taking those kind of steps that I was talking about. And now it's actually, at the end, it's done this kind of all necessary changes have been implemented. It's actually just reflecting back on the plan and actually said, has the ask been successfully completed? Which is awesome, right? We want the agent to actually rethink before it tells us, hey, I've come up with a solution. So once that happens, we're going to get given this view, which actually gives us a diff, basically. It enables us to understand what it has implemented so that we can go ahead and we can review for ourselves. So we open up our game.html here. We can see a very standard kind of table structure, which is actually just including those guesses there, which looks good to me. So if we continue, now we're going to open our model, which is our guess history. Very, very simple model, but it looks like it's got everything that's needed, which is great. And then finally, we open up our game controller and we can see it's actually embedded the logic, including that new model there. We didn't need to instruct it and say, right, create this, and I have another task of create this, now embed this. It's done all of these things together. It's really, really understood how the development operates, both in the front end and the back end rather, and how it all ties together. Now, once we're happy with that, we just have one more, and that is just to click accept all changes. It won't automatically merge. It actually is going to make sure that you have this kind of developer or human in the loop rather experience. So you're actually in control. If you're not happy, you can actually go back. You can ask it to make some further changes there. Now, finally, as all good developers should do, we're going to actually test the application, just make sure that it actually works. So we're going to have another guess. Let's guess basket. We're going to do make a guess. And we see it's got that guess history at the bottom. We can guess animal again. Spoilers, it's probably going to be the right answer here. But we can see it's added that feature at the end. Now, of course, we could actually use the other capabilities. Maybe we want to restyle it a little bit, but it's actually implemented all of this with that simple paragraph, right? We didn't need to tell it to change specific files. It has that intelligence. That's the case of the feature development agent for Q Developer. Give it a task to do. It's going to go through, it's going to plan, execute that step by step, and then it's actually going to provide you with a diff for you to be able to either accept or to ask it to make further changes. Okay, poll question for the chat. Who here loves writing unit tests? I'm going to guess no one, or guess very few people. Some people like them, maybe on a Friday afternoon, but most people don't like writing unit tests. And the reason why is actually not because we don't see the value in them, it's because the complexity of writing a really good code coverage suite takes a lot of effort, right? So this is actually the beauty of the unit test agent in Amazon Q Developer. You can write /test, and that is going to kick off an ability to actually generate a unit test for the open class you have. Okay, let's actually jump into the IDE because this is the best way to really understand this. So here we are in our IDE, and I'm going to open the Word model. This is a model that was actually used in the existing application that we just saw. We can see it's maybe not as complicated as some other models, but it gives us a good view of a standard kind of model there. And we're going to write some unit tests for this. So as before, we're going to open up the chat on the left-hand side, type /, which is going to activate the ability to choose the agent, and we're going to type /test, enabling us to generate those unit tests. So we don't have to tell it what to do. And once we hit return, it's going to start going through and breaking down and understanding what are the methods that I'm actually going to need. Now it's found here the get word, the contains is correct, and the get info methods. Now, because this agent understands how to write amazing unit tests in Java or in Python, once it understands the methods, it begins to understand what is the best way to really build out this unit test. Understanding best practices like, we should be mocking live APIs. We should be making sure that we're accounting for particular kind of parallel workflows or even exception handling, making sure that that is in place. Like in the previous agent, once that's actually generated, we can just click on the word test actual or the word test file here, which is actually our unit test for that word class. See, as we're scrolling through, this has created a complex unit test coverage suite, right? I am definitely no longer the best coder that I know, but I can say that even in my heyday, this would have taken me hours to have created something at this depth of coverage there. And that's just taken literally a couple of minutes. As I said, I haven't sped up these videos. This is actually real time. I wanted to make sure it presented a real experience. So once we have reviewed, again, we're going to just click accept. And that's going to automatically merge this into the code base. That's unit test agent. It's as simple as that. You type /test, you run it in your current file, and it's going to go ahead. It's going to generate a comprehensive code coverage suite for you for your Java and your Python projects. Okay, so next we're going to now be diving into the documentation agent, and for that I'm now going to hand over to Mirabella, who is going to walk us through it. Over to you, Mirabella.
Thank you so much, Chris. Just 1 second. I shall share my screen and I will take you through the other agents. Alrighty, am I sharing the correct screen with the presentation, and can I get a thumbs up that everything looks fine? Amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for the first half of the presentation. I shall be taking you through the remaining 3 agents. But before I get started, I just wanted to say another hi to anyone who may have joined us halfway through after Chris has introduced all of us and what we're doing. Basically, we're doing a worldwide tour of all the Q developer agents, and we've got 3 left, which I shall be covering. In the meantime, I got some very good questions in the chat, some feedback about the service as well. Please keep them coming. I think I covered most of them for now. So Chris will be taking over the chat whilst I am chatting to you directly, and then we'll see if we have some time at the end for some live Q&A as well. But please do keep the questions coming. I think some of you may find the upcoming agents very useful. Someone in the chat was mentioning previously that they tried to use documentation as well. So let me tell you more about how you can be using QDeveloper to document your code. When it comes to documentation, Chris was mentioning earlier that, look, not many developers like writing tests. It's tedious, it takes time. We all know that we should be doing TDD on paper, but in reality, we all also know that actually sometimes we just write our code and then the tests just follow so that we can tick the box that we have tests for our code as well. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, the same is valid for documentation. We all know that we should really be documenting our code properly. For the people that we're sharing the code with, for the people that may be taking over this code base later, we all know that we should be writing our proper comments, that we should be writing our Java docs. Java docs, for example, have some very specific instructions of how you should be writing those. But unfortunately, it's tedious. It takes time. And we also all know that README files are very important whenever it comes to a project. The more detailed they are, the better. But again, they take time. We just want to experiment with our code, share it with others. It takes a lot of time to just sit down and go over everything that we've written again and just detail everything nicely. Now, I want to go over a couple of ways in which you can be documenting your code using QDeveloper. I've already, in the conversations that I've been having with you earlier in the chat, I've been suggesting some different ways of using QDeveloper. For today, we are focused on the agents. But when it comes to documenting your code, I just wanted to give a shout out to the fact that you can actually, if your use case is more like writing some documentation for your code, as you are writing your code, maybe you should be using inline chat. Inline chat is basically the way in which you can, as you write your code using QDeveloper in the same window, you can be interacting with QDeveloper as well to help it complete your code, to help it give you code suggestions. So you could be writing something like comments or documentation for specific methods using inline chat. You can also be using the Q chat. So it's the same panel to the left of our IDE. We are using VS Code today with beige mode, as someone called it. Using that chat panel is not just the agents that are available in there, it's also the availability of Q for us to chat with it. So in the chat, we can ask it, please help me write some documentation for the code in this file as an example. Or I can also be using the context menu. The context menu, I've explained it to someone earlier in the chat as well, is another way of interacting with QDeveloper. So as I'm writing my code with QDeveloper, or as I'm looking at a file of my code, what I can do is I can select a snippet of my code, I can click write, tab right, whatever you prefer, and then from there is an option for QDeveloper, and then that's going to give me a couple of options: fix, refactor, or send to prompt. So I can send that snippet of the code to my prompt, which is then going to open it in the chat, and then I can ask it to document that specific code snippet. Now, the final one, and which is the one that I'm going to focus on because ultimately we're in the agents webinar, is the /doc agent. So let me show you how that works actually, because videos are better than words. For this workflow, Q will actually scan the project or a particular folder. You will see in just a second how I can select the folder that I'm selecting. Then it will generate documentation for that code. When I say generate documentation, in our case, in our very, very specific case today, that means a README file. So it would either generate a new README file or it will update the README file that I already have. So let's see how it works. We're going back to, to our VS Code. And in here, you can see in the left chat panel, same as before, we have the option to slash. And one of these slash options is /doc. You can see it's telling me that it can help me generate documentation for my code, either create a README, update a README. And then I've got the option to select the project. I'm going to tell it, okay, please do create a README for this project. And then you've probably noticed it when Chris was showing you the other agents as well. The agents are actually quite verbose. They're telling me what they're working on. They're giving me more details on what's happening behind the scenes. So in this case, this agent is creating a README for my project. It's telling me it may take a few minutes, and it's also telling me that what it's doing is scanning the source files, it's summarizing them, and then it's generating documentation. I'm going to accelerate this a little bit, but as you can see, the entirety of the video takes 2 minutes. So do not worry, it's actually not so slow. So in my case, it's generated the README file. So as you can see here, I've got a div file now with what basically it thinks that should be added to my README. You can see it's quite detailed. It's detailing the application, the repo structure. It's creating some usage instructions, including installation, all my dependencies, everything I have to install. This is the really boring part once I'm done with a project, to detail how the project can be used by others as well. And then it's also detailing the infrastructure behind my application. Now it's a div file, so I've got a couple of options here. I can either accept whatever it's proposing to me, or I can give it some suggestions to make any changes, or in case I really don't like it, I can fully reject it. In my case, I'm happy with it. I've accepted it. So then it's taken me to a preview of my markdown file, as you can see, all nicely formatted as to how it will look once I actually publish this. Next agent I want to talk about is the review agent. Chris gave you a hint earlier. If you have been working with QDeveloper for some time, I saw that some of you have actually already experimented with the service, which is amazing. You may have seen a differentiator in this service, which was the security scans. Now, the security scans have received a bit of an upgrade when it comes to the code review agent. Now, this agent works similarly to the other agents. It will review all the relevant code in my workspace or the current file as well. Then it will provide me with a list of issues for my review. I can then investigate, fix, or please don't ignore the issues as well. Let's see how this will work. In the same chat, I can go, and now I would be /reviewing. It's going to ask me if I would like to review the workspace or if I would like to review only the active file. We had some questions earlier about how does this look at the workspace, how does the context work over here. Again, the same details about what it's actually doing behind the scenes. So first it's going to kick off the code review, then it's going to start reviewing my code, and then it's going to start processing the review results. Why it's processing, you're going to see in just a second, because it will give me a very nice report of everything that is found. There were some issues that were purposefully injected here, just to let you know. Please do not judge. I actually have quite a few issues in my code. I'm definitely practicing what I'm preaching. So as you can see over here, it told me that it's completed the code review and it's discovered a number of issues. You can see here the issues are ordered by severity. We have documentation on what this severity actually means. So some issues are critical, some are high, some are medium. Let's take a look at what sort of issues this is looking at. If you would like to see more details about what this actually scans for, what it's looking for, there is actually a library. It's called the QDetector library. Basically, it's some top OWASP vulnerabilities that you may be thinking of. There's some AWS best practices as well that it will be suggesting. There's some infrastructure best practices too that it will be suggesting. And there's some light improvement suggestions as well that you will be able to see in just a second. So Chris has a link to the QDeveloper library. He'll be sharing that in the chat if he gets a chance, so that you can take a look at more examples of what this is doing. Taking a look at the critical vulnerability, if you can see over here, first, it starts with telling me that there's a package vulnerability. Not just that. So it will be telling me, look, there's a package vulnerability over there. You have an issue in your code. But this is a generative AI assistant, right? So not only will be telling me, look, there is a problem in your code, it will also suggest a fix for me. So in my case, in this particular package vulnerability case, you can see that it's suggesting a fix to upgrade to update this package to a new version, which may not lead to vulnerabilities further down the line. So it's helping me basically understand where there are issues, but also how to fix them. In this case, you can see this is a code issue. So it's telling me, look, please do not use such classes. If possible, use IAM roles instead of long-term access keys. If I don't understand, in my case, there was quite a big block of text, right? Maybe I don't want to read it all. I didn't understand it. I can actually click on explain. And what this will do is it will send the issue to the chat. And in the chat, you can see I'm being given more details about what that issue meant. So it's going to tell me, look, this is the problematic code. This is some key improvements that you can make. Here are some best practices. Here are some further resources that you can take a look at. So you can dive deeper into any of these issues. What I'm looking at right now is a CloudFormation template. So these issues, these high issues, are actually issues that are related to my infrastructure as code. And it's giving me some recommendations for my infrastructure code, such as, for example, my bucket is not encrypted, my replication there is not enabled. It has some very permissive policies as well. I wanted to give a shout out to this because not many people know about it. Security, the /review agent actually can take a look at your infrastructure as code as well. In my case, I'm looking at CloudFormation in this particular example, but you can also be using this for HCL, so for Terraform. So if you are using infrastructure as code, this is just an additional step for you to test your templates before actually deploying this infrastructure into your accounts. And I mentioned sometimes it's going to give me, this agent sometimes will give me some recommendations that are linked to AWS best practices. This is again a code recommendation, so it's helping me improve the code I'm writing a little bit. It was an error-related recommendation. And the next one will be the lifecycle, a suggestion to use lifecycle configurations for S3 buckets, which is an AWS best practice, but it may not be something that we may be using. It's a low issue. So as I mentioned, there's documentation that's telling me actually what it looks like when it classifies all of these issues. And once again, please do not judge the number of issues. You can actually, something I also wanted to mention is you can either run this agent all at once. So you can take a look at your workspace. Maybe you want to run this agent and be in my situation where you receive, I think in total is like 31 issues. So you can either be in this situation, or what you can also be doing is you can actually enable this scanning to be running as you are writing your code. This is auto scanning. And what this means is that as you are writing your code with QDeveloper will actually have like a bit of a pop-up that will tell you, hey, look, issue identified, take a look at it. So that helps you become a bit more proactive when it comes to security. We call this in fancy terms, shifting security left in the hands of developers, so that as you're writing your code, you can prevent any vulnerabilities when it comes to security, or when it comes to code best practices, AWS best practices that you may be incurring further down the way otherwise. The final agent I want to mention, and I will be super quick for this, is the QDeveloper agent for transformation. So this is particularly helpful when you've got a lot of technical debt that you have to deal with. Say you've just joined a company, acquired a company, or maybe you are just a new joiner and you have inherited a very, very old code base. Or there are some code bases lying around. There's some old Java code that no one really wants to touch because we don't know what will happen if we touch it, but it's there. And we know that it's not modern. We know that we need to upgrade it, but it's just one of these tasks that we never really have time for. And we know that when we start it, it's going to take us a lot of time. So we don't know how much time it's actually going to take. We know it's going to be long. We know it's going to be tedious. So it's one of those tasks that we keep postponing. Well, not anymore, because the QDeveloper agent for transformation is here to help us modernize our code bases. I will be focusing specifically on Java today, and actually the Java transformation has been a feature in QDeveloper for quite some time. It is not something new. It's been around, it's been tested for quite some time. What is new and is in preview actually is the .NET transformation, which takes .NET Framework application on Windows and transforms them to cross-platform .NET applications on Linux. What is also new, Chris mentioned earlier, COBOL applications on mainframes that can now be transformed to Java applications on AWS. And a really hot topic nowadays, VMware workloads. You can take your VMware workloads on premises, code, and then you can have this upgraded to VMware workloads that are ready to run on Amazon EC2. For today, I will be specifically showing you Java, and the reason for this is that just the other week, we have announced that we can now upgrade applications to a new version of Java. So previously, we could have taken our Java applications in Java 8 and Java 11 and upgrade them to Java 17. As of last week, it's now also available to upgrade to Java 21. So this is brand new. I will, however, show you a demo for Java 17 as well, just for consistency, but I just wanted to give a shout out that this has recently just been launched as well. I will be super quick. But what I wanted to also mention is that actually the previous webinar has focused specifically on Java code transformation. So if you're interested in finding out more, or if you're interested in seeing any of these other topics like .NET, COBOL, VMware even, in the survey that will pop up once this webinar is done, please just put that down or let us know now in the chat as well. And Amit will be more than happy to organize further webinars on this topic. Now, I did tell you a lot about transformation. It probably sounds a little bit too good to be true. And actually, a customer just a couple of weeks ago has asked me, what do you do internally to use agents and generative AI and improving your coding practices? Well, I actually have a case study from Amazon when it comes to code transformation, because teams within Amazon have actually used code transformation to upgrade 1,000 Java applications to a later version. It has taken them, for the 1,000 application, it has taken them 2 days. And these applications, upgrading each of these applications has taken about 10 minutes each on average. I will not make you wait 10 minutes. I have a sped up demo, but I will show you in just a second how it looks like. So we're back to our very familiar interface. In our case, now we will /transform. So you can see this is one of the options available. And you can see in my drop down now, I can choose which project I'm going to transform. The source code version is 8, and you could see available transformed versions were both, the target versions were both 17 and 21. What I wanted to mention is that this requires Maven builds. So if your Java code today doesn't support that, unfortunately, this will not be a possibility for you, but do let us know what you're using. You can see again quite a verbose description of what the agent is going to do. So it's going to take a look at different parts of my code, and then it's also going to give me the option to either get one diff file, so what we've seen before as well with the doc agent, with the feature dev agent, or if I want to keep better track of all the changes that is done, it can also offer me multiple diffs. Next is going to ask me for my Java path, and then it's going to start building my project. It's telling me it can take up to 10 minutes. There's also some restrictions in terms of how long the project can be built for. This is in the documentation. We'll be sharing the link so that you can see basically everything, all the libraries that are supported, frameworks, and all the conditions for that. It's opening a new panel for me, which is the Transformation Hub, so that I can follow what it's doing, so I can keep going back to my normal work, but also follow what this is doing. And in this Transformation Hub, you can see I've opened it over here. Again, it's going to give me more details about what's actually happening behind the scenes. So it's going to upload my code. It's going to start building this code in very specific build environment for this project. And then it's going to generate the transformation plan, which we will see in just a second, and then it's going to start the transformation. So let's skip a little bit, accelerate this a little bit, and go straight to the transformation plan. So the transformation plan is very detailed. It will analyze the lines of code. The lines of code are very important because that's what pricing is based on. So it will tell me how many lines of code are there. It will tell me all the dependencies. In case of the dependencies, you can see some dependencies will be added, some dependencies will be removed, and some dependencies will be updated to a version that will be compatible with the new version of my code. So it actually creates all of these files from scratch based on the project that I've given it. And then you will apply the code changes, you will finalize transformation summary, and it's given me a list of the files that it will be working on to transform. Now, it is telling me over there, look, these are the steps that I'm taking. You can keep following it. There's logs as well, but I will not keep you waiting. Do not worry. I know we're nearing the time of the end of this webinar, so I'm actually going to accelerate right to the end. So my transformation has now been complete. I can view the summary of my transformation. You can see in there the 531 lines of code in my application has taken 13 minutes. So if you remember the statistics from Amazon, on average, it was 10 minutes. This 500 lines of code have taken 13 minutes, just to get an idea of how long this is taking. 17 dependencies have been upgraded, and there are no deprecated APIs detected. We're going to see more details about the dependencies in just a second as this scrolls down. You can see it's creating a summary. So if you want to have some documentation about what's actually happened in this transformation, obviously, if you're undertaking a large-scale modernization project, you will want to have documentation about how you've actually modernized your code. So you will be having this file here that will be giving all the details about what's actually happened in the background. As you can see here, I have access to the build log as well, in case this is something that I want to take a look at. And then it's going to generate a summary. That's going to tell me everything in a summarized version about what's happened. So my SDK has been updated, Spring Boot, JUnit, migration, and it's created a couple of code snippets as well. It's added log4j as well. And then what it will also tell me is some further recommendations. Remember, across all the agents, actually, in the review agent as well, it's not only telling me, look, this is happening, this is an issue, it's also telling me, like, look, you can actually further improve this as well, right? So it's giving me some extra recommendations here in case I would like to spend some more time and improve my project. And then I have the list of dependencies. So as I mentioned earlier, some dependencies will be removed, some dependencies will be added, and some dependencies will be updated. I can see the full list of everything that's happened in this summary of my transformation. So these are some additional dependencies that are added, any deprecated code, then a full list of all the files changed, and then it will tell me to take a look and review all the codes. So I have my diff files in here. I can take a look at all of them, see the differences between the codes, see exactly what's been added, what's been removed. And then as with all the agents, I can accept or reject all of these changes. So this has been very fast, especially when it came to the transformation. But as I mentioned, we do have deeper dives, and we're more than happy to organize deeper dives into any of the topics that we covered today. With that, I just wanted to tell you and give you a hint to try Amazon Q Developer today. I know a lot of you in the chat have been telling me that you've tried it already. I could see a lot of questions still coming in throughout my part of the presentation as well. I just wanted to give you a quick call to action as well to give QDeveloper a try. A lot of people actually don't know. You were asking me about benchmarks as well. To get started with QDeveloper is actually free. So there is an option of QDeveloper that you can get started with just by using a builder ID. That you can give you can give it a try. The main difference will be that you will have some limits that are not there in the professional version, and that with the professional version you can actually get further details about how QDeveloper is used across the enterprise because it's integrated with Identity Center. So there are some differences when it comes to the limits, when it comes to visibility, but overall, if you have never tried QDeveloper and you liked what you saw in our VS Code, you can definitely give it a try. If you'd like to take a look at QDeveloper in your company and potentially do a POC, well, next slide helps you with that because these are all of our contact details. Do send us a line telling us we'd like to proceed with this, or we'd like to dive deeper into this, we'd like a session on that. Do use these emails to let us know if there's anything that maybe you'd like to dive deeper into or any questions that were not covered. Now, speaking of questions, we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to check in on Chris and see how he's been doing with the questions in the chat and if there's anything else that he'd like to bring to the audience as well.
Yeah, so I'm hoping I've got to a certain point where I can answer. I think there's like 4 questions remaining. So the first is, I wonder what version of log4j is inserted. Funny. When it comes to actually doing code transformations, it does actually, I think in that results page, tell you the versions of the packages of what they've been updated to. So you can actually review that for yourself before you go ahead and you proceed there. Can you provide more information on the transform from .NET Framework on Windows to .NET applications on Linux? So this capability is available within Visual Studio, either Community or I think it's Enterprise or Professional Edition. Apologies, edition names are skipping out of my head there. But Visual Studio has that ability. Just like in the Java example, you run /transform, except what it's going to do is on top of actually providing you with what the upgrade path is from a legacy version of .NET to a more recent version, it's also going to include this Linux readiness report that basically details to you how ready it is. Not every change can actually be automatically upgraded because Windows incompatibility, things like registries and stuff like that aren't on Linux, but it actually flags these parts to you, and then you can make like an informed decision on what you need to make as a change. But it tries to do as heavy lifting as possible. Some do need an informed decision from you. Okay, I have a project written in Spring MVC, and I would like to transform it into a Spring Boot application. could Amazon Q developer assist with the transition? I honestly, every time people ask, can it? So if it's a small task, try in the chat. The chat is powered by Amazon Bedrock. It has, some pretty high level of intelligence now. But where it is bigger tasks, you can also use the agent for software development. Even if slash transform doesn't work for your language today, slash dev can actually sometimes help there, or a combination of slash dev and the chat. It's a little bit slower than maybe slash transform, but much faster than doing it manually. So I encourage you to just try those features out if we don't have a specific feature. They can do amazing things. I've seen people before we actually had the slash transform for COBOL use slash dev to help them on their way to go from COBOL to Java. They were using it to actually document their code. Okay, let me see what other questions within the time I have. I'm waiting on more PHP support for slash test. These emails here, ping us. We can add a product feature request. We can add a CI. The only way we evolve these tools is hearing from you. So please, please, please ping us, and we're going to get that added there. You can also use slash dev. Again, I'm going to keep on saying slash dev is an amazing tool. So use that for PHP for the moment. Maybe it can actually help you do what you need. Does it train on the data or expose code to anyone other than me? So I have shared the data kind of opt out there. We do not train the underlying models on people's code, regardless. These are Amazon Bedrock models. They're all in a sandboxed environment. They're not being passed along with anyone else. But you can explicitly opt out if you're using the free tier for what we call like a improvement of the service. That's not the generative AI. That's the service itself. And if you're using professional edition, we just don't ever enable that. We're just never going to collect that. Okay, let's see. How many more questions? What about using Q on the AWS console? How many services covered as of today? I feel like that might be a topic for another time. But Q Developer does have capabilities for asking questions. It integrates with services like Lambda to do troubleshooting and debugging. And in CloudWatch, it can even help you to run investigations. That is a session I know is definitely going to happen probably month after next. Do you have control over underlying LLM models? No, you don't have the control today. If you want to see it, ping these emails. Going to keep saying that. Any suggestions, keep emailing us. Any open source on the code backing developer? No, as of today, it's proprietary, so we don't share that. But if you think there's a use case you'd like to see some of that, just ping us. We can have a discussion there. Okay, I think that's all the questions that I have managed to answer as fast as I can.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
That was amazing. And thanks, audience. I think there were like a lot of questions, a lot of interaction, really, really good. Looks like I am all set up to use Q in my VS Code, which I'm going to install right after this and get started with some coding now. Thank you.
Don't forget the light theme, Amit. Please don't forget the beige theme.
Thank you again. You'll all be presented with a feedback page now. Please fill in. That helps us to improve, decide on the next sessions as well. You'll receive an email for the registration for the next session. Please sign in for the next session as well. We are doing it every we are doing it third week Thursday of the month. So the next one is on 20th of March. You will receive an invite shortly. So looking forward to see you again. Thank you again. Thanks, presenters. Thanks, participants. Really looking forward to see you next month. Cheers.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, all. Bye.